Hello everybody and welcome back to KXP, where we explore the cosmos in third person. In the episode before last, we managed to beat the KXP POV crowd to the Mun by sending Tomeny and Wenlas and Kerman. Unfortunately, we decided to put them in a rover which was not equipped with a flag, so therefore we weren't able to conquer the Mun before them. So now, in the last episode, we set up a comms net, which will be very helpful today, but the ultimate goal for this episode is to send a rescue pod for those Kerbals equipped with the flag. But we're going to start off with two of these side missions that we have. The first being that we need to alter the orbit of one of our existing satellites above the Mun. We also have a secondary orbit that we can put it into. And then thirdly, we have to deploy a rover. So we're going to do those three missions. It's not going to take too long. So let's just hop in the tracking station and then switch over to the Mun ScanSat. And then we will see that we have a couple different orbits that it wants us to do. And they're all fairly simple. One of them we're actually almost in already. So that's nice. So let's go ahead and take control of that probe. This is the ScanSat that has already completed making a map of the Mun. We're in a polar orbit, of course. So we've got two contracts here, the first of which specifies that it must be the ScanSat probe that goes into the orbit, and that's going to be the first one that we work on here. The second one, this red one, can be any probe, but thankfully it doesn't require us to launch a new mission, so we can repurpose this probe to do both. As you see here, my apoapsis and periapsis were shaking, so I just quickly tapped the throttle and killed it. And that, if you ever experience that little bug, that's the best way to fix it. Unfortunately, it does require you to have some fuel. But nonetheless, we are close to our apoapsis and periapsis. We're below. Our periapsis is higher than it needs to be, and our apoapsis is lower. So we're just going to take some time, readjust this orbit, and I'll see you when we're done. And with this final burn, we complete the contract. We were, luckily enough, already in the correct inclination and eccentricity for it. This second one, however, is going to be a little bit more complicated. The contractors of Sean's Cannery were very specific about where they want our probe to be, so we are going to take a little more time as well to do this. As you see here, it's almost at a 90-degree angle of where we are currently. So there's going to be a lot of normal or anti-normal burning here, as well as a lot of retrograde to balance everything out. But first things first, we need to lift our apoapsis to reach the desired height for the contract. Having remote tech is, specifically remote tech's flight computer, is very handy here because it allows you to really have very precise burns. The human is fast, but the computer will probably always be faster. Unfortunately, because the timing is different in remote tech as it is in the SOC KSP alarm clock, so sometimes the remote tech will be known to burn later than the maneuver states, and then sometimes that leads to overshooting. So it's not perfect, but when you're dealing with low thrust burns, when you do throttle limiting on that, it's pretty good. It's pretty accurate. So now we're doing the hard sideways turn to get ourselves into the right angle. And we're also going to add some radial in. And that's going to, as you saw, that aligned our eccentricity up, so that way, rather than being a perfect circle, we can line our periapsis to the point where it wanted us to. Now that, before we do our burn, we're going to transmit all the science that we got from doing the mapping. Not only does it give us the ScanStat map that we can look at, analyze, and utilize, but it also gives us science. So it was pretty useful to come back here to this probe to do these contracts. And remote tech takes over, and we just watch it pull close to the surface and then extend out. Beautiful. You can really do a lot with the maneuver tool. It's pretty interesting. So now we are close, but not quite perfect. And so I'm going to time warp ahead to the apoapsis to adjust my periapsis. And that's when I noticed something. As you see here, the red line is circling counterclockwise, and I do believe that we are going clockwise. And as I zoom in here, I can see that indeed we are going the exact opposite direction of the contract. And so, unfortunately, even if we were to get ourselves in the exact altitude and the exact inclination, all that, it still wouldn't solve the contract. So we're gonna have to turn our whole craft around. At first I start by playing with the normal and anti-normal to spin it on its axis, but then I realized, hey, why spend all that amount of work when I can literally just burn in reverse far enough to change my direction. So as we pull on the retrograde here, we see it flip around, and then all we have to do is put it into the desired periapsis location, and that will solve our problem. Thankfully, it does take a bit of delta V, 300 and some odd meters per second, as you can see there at the bottom, but we have quite a bit left over in our tank from getting this here. It's always nice to leave your ScanSats with a little bit extra fuel, because you never know, you could utilize them to go to a different moon, you could utilize them to be an impactor or do contracts like this. So thankfully we had enough delta V that reversing our direction really wasn't that much of an inconvenience, and pretty soon we will be getting ready to finish up this contract. And there we have it. We were already in the right inclination, the right eccentricity, and the right apoapsis for it, so when we just put ourselves into our final resting point, it solved the contract. So that's nice. It's good to take care of these little side missions and get the money for that. Sometimes I don't feel like they're the most interesting, so I'm typically tempted to skip by and be like, oh, well, we completed these off camera, as to not take up the time of the episode. But I felt like this one was a little bit worth it, or the changing of the MUN ScanSat probe was worth it. This one is debatable, but it was quick enough that might as well show you. But yeah, we had a contract. All we had to do was deploy a rover It gets more complicated as time goes on. It wants you first just to deploy it on Kerbin, which is literally just this. You know, we put it on the launch pad, take the brakes off, drive it around a little bit, make sure that it's stated as a rover, and that contract is solved. But later it will want us to do that, but you know, on the MUN, on Minmis, on Duna, so on and so forth. So then that will be a bit more challenging. So it's a good thing that we got that done soon. But anyways, we're hopping in the VAB, but I'm actually just going to skip forward to the launch pad. Designing the rocket took a lot of time, but wasn't... we're going to show you what we made once we get it up into orbit. So for now, let's just get ourselves into orbit, and then we're going to get this craft to the MUN. And this craft is probe controlled. It's a 2-seater using the Corvus pod, which is based on the Gemini craft. So you'll see that soon enough. This isn't the greatest launch profile as you see here. It's just that the Pila engine is just so overpowered that it gets too much vertical velocity before we can even start tipping ourselves over. So we just kind of do this little wonky, inefficient burn, but we have enough delta V. We're a little overpowered here. So we plot in our circularization burn. We have plenty of delta V to handle it. At around 62 kilometers above the surface, we deploy the fairing, and then that's when we get the first view of our capsule. You see there, it's controlled by a probe. It's got the Corvus capsule underneath with the communication dish, and then TAC life support for up to about 2 years, I believe. And then all powered by a single tank with a Terrier engine. There we go. We get a bunch of funds for that, because we have the massive scale launches strategy from Strategia activated. So once we get heavy crafts into orbit, we get money. And considering the fact that we're overbuilding everything right now, we're almost always going to be getting the right amount of tonnage into orbit. So it's if you're using Strategia, having the massive scale launches is almost always worth it, because at a certain point your crafts will always fit the bill, and then you can kind of gain some of the money back. So it's always worth it. Anyways, we have our maneuver plotted out for the MUN, so we're just going to time warp our way to it. And it's pretty standard stuff here. I'm just kind of blowing through, but it was all quick enough that I felt like there wasn't really a need to cut it out. As you see there, just a short enough burn. It did, however, put us on an impact position. We don't have a lot of delta V left, so I could technically stage it right here and allow the lower stage to impact the MUN and not be space trash. However, we're going to use some of that delta V to avoid that. And it's very little. We're going to turn our throttle limiter down very low, but it's still only a short burn. But it'll be enough to miss the MUN and not crash. So we're going to take that maneuver. There isn't a lot of delta V left in this, but the thing is that this has such a high thrust to weight ratio that the amount of delta V necessary to circularize the MUN is capable. It's doable for us. So we're gonna make our maneuver at the periapsis low in space above the MUN, point ourselves retrograde using the flight computer, taking over for the burn, let it turn, and then we will time warp our way there. And with that, we have circularized above the MUN, fully probe automated, completely controlled by our ground station. So now we're going to go and plot in our landing burn. Unfortunately, it's going to be a little bit dark because it is right on the horizon of dawn, but nonetheless, we should be able to see everything. We did turn our planet shine up a little bit. It's less realistic. It would be almost pitch black on this side of the mud, but I realize I do want I want y'all to be able to see something at least, and not just have a black screen. So have to give and take where we can. So I very quickly through the burn, we got rid of the rest of the Delta V in that lower stage almost immediately. So it just was left to our lower stage to take over. And we finished our burn. We are now in the desired trajectory, and we're going to be coming down in this crater canyon here, where our intrepid Kerbals are waiting to come home. We're not really caring about where we land. We could have altered our trajectory to land a bit closer to the Kerbals, but we're just going to take what we can and just be as safe as we can to make sure that this mission works out the first time. And we're doing so because we have the Bon Voyage mod installed on the rover that the Kerbals are inhabiting, so we can put it onto an autopilot situation. So once we land this craft, we can just lay down a waypoint and then have the Kerbals travel automatically to the craft very carefully and safely, autonomously, so we can guarantee their survival. So we're just going to land in a relatively flat area, relatively, and we're going to do our best to keep it upright. Thankfully, the Corvus pod, the little top piece that has the parachutes, also comes with RCS, so it allows it to keep stabilized. It's actually a pretty cool pod. This is my first time using it, and I actually liked it a bit more than I thought I would. I don't like it in IVA, so maybe we'll utilize it more in this round, or in this series. But anyways, right now we are setting up a waypoint, and we're gonna set it to our craft, but we can't set it exactly to the craft, because then when we transfer it back to the rover after it's moved, it will crash into it and explode both of them. So it's very important that you make sure that the waypoint is not exactly where the craft is. I'm just playing around a little bit with some of these numbers, just hoping to offset it a little bit, but I don't know well enough how to manipulate these numbers to do what I want with it, so I'm just kind of playing around till I find something that's close enough. I mean, either of those two would have worked perfectly fine, but I go ahead and reconfigure and try it again. But we will eventually get a waypoint nailed down here pretty soon, and then we'll switch over to the other craft, plot it into Bon Voyage, and call it a day. You know what? That looks fine. Let's hit apply. We'll save it and say goodbye to this craft for now. It's got plenty of battery, and the sun is about to rise, so should be fine electricity wise. When we come back to our craft, it starts to slide because we are on a hill after all, but because we have Parallax continues and we have collisions turned on, the rocks stop us from sliding all the way down the hill. So now it's time to plot in the Bon Voyage mod. You can do this two ways. You can either click on the probe like I did here, or use the sidebar. There is a side menu. We go and use the current waypoint and do a system check to see that I can make it. However, for some reason it can't plot a course to it. I think it might be because of all these rocks, or maybe because we're in the wrong position. Either way, the mod isn't going to take over and autopilot us there, so we're going to need to figure something else out if we want to. So I'm going to go ahead and turn our RCS on. When I say turn our RCS on, what I mean is turn our reaction wheel on, but I set it to the same key as RCS. But that allows us to kind of flip our way around these rocks and lift ourselves over it, giving us a little bit more freedom in this horrible place. So now we're pointed a little more towards our direction, and flipping around, unfortunately, because I still don't have a good handle on which controls go where. It does take a little bit of learning. We accidentally pop Wenlas out of the driver's seat, so we get her back in. Wenlas is our pilot, Tomeny is our scientist. But yeah, so I put on the brakes, so I figured now we could try Bon Voyage again, now that we're in a different location and we're pointed a little bit more towards our target. So let's go ahead and open that up. But when I go to hit current waypoint, it still says that it can't find a route. It's very unfortunate. So I'm gonna do some things to change it, but ultimately none of them work. I don't know why. Typically this mod works. If you do know why, if you know, my current estimation is that because we have collisions turned on with all these rocks, Bon Voyage is taking that into account, which is actually pretty interesting that it would do that. But I'm guessing that's taking that into account and being like, yeah, there's no way you're getting across this crater. Are you crazy? But that's not going to discourage us because we need to get to our craft. I think I'd like to test that theory out again in a later episode. We may send another rover, probably probe-controlled rover, this time to a different area on the Mun, maybe a little less rocky area of the Mun, and see if the Bon Voyage still has the same problem as it does here. Because if so, then that's unfortunate, and this may be the end of our roving on the Mun. We may have to forego grabbing all the biomes that we can, and then just wait until Min-Miss, which is a much cleaner pathway. But it is now that I'm determining that Bon Voyage is not going to bring us there, so we will have to, unfortunately, drive ourselves there as safely as possible, because space is dangerous, as I've said many a time before, and the entire time that we're driving, every second that we, as the player, are in control of the craft is a moment that everything can go into disaster. But Wenlas is an experienced pilot and has driven them this far in the rover and has not come this far to only come this far, so she is going to breakdance her way down the hill and to safety. I'm gonna pop open Bon Voyage just one more time to see, maybe it was that position that I was in, but still no path. This is when I determined that it was most likely the rocks. We're reaching a relatively clear area, not a lot of rocks to be had, and the ones that are to be had are small enough that our craft can pass easily through it. In Parallax Continues, you actually get more control over the collision than you do in the original Parallax 2, and it allows you to choose, you can have collision for every single object, even these tiny little ones we could have collision for. They could affect our wheels and landing gear. Right now we have it set to just above that, so it's all these moderate sized rocks, and anything bigger than that. Trees on Kerman are now dangerous. I'm wondering whether or not I can do my around the world mission anymore if trees are that deadly, because we did a lot of quick flying through heavily wooded areas. But right now we have a pretty clear path up here to the right. We could have gone directly for our target, but there's a lot more rocks there, so we're going to try to offshoot a little bit, come around from the side. Wait a minute. Did I see what I think I saw? Wenlas. No. No. Oh, this is our first Kerbal killed. Not the first in the Janus project. Rest in peace, Bob. But Wenlas. She was our best pilot. Alright, Tomeny, it's time to stop playing around. You guys had a lot of fun and got a little bit too brazen and paid the ultimate price. And since you're not trained, let's just say you're not trained to pilot this craft, unfortunately you are not allowed to drive it because we can't risk you as well. So we're going to go ahead and get you out of your seat, collect all the science that you worked so hard to grab, and then you're going to just EVA your way there. It's fairly close. I like having these science collection units on there because you can very easily and with one click grab all the science on the craft and put it in one location, allowing your Kerbal to grab it instead of having to run to every single experiment. Unfortunately, a lot of those science experiments are being discarded because we actually already have this biome. So the science that I did right at the very end was useless, but nonetheless, good to keep in mind. Like I mentioned in the previous episode where we were here, because I still have forgotten to change the keyboard shortcut, we're gonna have to pilot our EVA in first person. But in the next time I should hopefully have it fixed and be able to fly around in third. Before we go, since Tomeny is a scientist, he is going to look for a moon rock. However, I should have worked on turning the surface feature finder on while landed on the ground because, multitasking like this isn't the smartest idea. We've got something that's relatively close. It's always hard to really determine where these markers are spatially speaking. As we see here, it's farther than our craft. We're actually going to be passing that. Hopefully it's not so far that it makes getting back to the craft difficult. Thankfully, it is a rock that is very clear of a lot of other debris, and it's easily findable right here on the surface. Go ahead and turn that off. And appreciate this glorious moon rock. It's hard to think that disaster struck and just moments ago, looking at his face, so happy. I mean, he is a Kerbal after all, and exploration, science, that's in their blood. And there is quite a bit of science to be had on the MUN here. And so he's going to go ahead and take that, take an EVA report, and collect this moonstone. Munstone. Either way. And then he is going to head back towards the craft and work on getting his way home. But not before taking a surface sample, because again, so much science to be had. We remember that it's not actually at the waypoint, but slightly off from it, so we take a quick look around, and it is a little hard to see the craft against the dark gray background. If the sun was up, it may have been a little easier, or if lights were on it, that would have been nice, but nonetheless, it was close enough that we could find it. I tried to hit the back of it to tip it over, but it didn't do anything. Maybe on Min-Miss, Min-Miss has less gravity than this, so it might have worked there, but unfortunately, we are not in the best position to take off, so we are going to have to figure out something with that. So very carefully, Tomeny lines himself up so he can jump up and grab the ladder. He's going to board inside, but only momentarily to refill his oxygen, food, and water, and then grab the flag. It's not in the craft's inventory, so I'm just going to have to assume that it's underneath his seat. But when we go to get him out on EVA, we're actually told that we're not allowed to. This Kerbal isn't trained well enough to leave the craft. After all he's been through, to hear that from Mission Control really frustrated him, so he demanded that they go and fix that situation. First, we're going to recover all these pieces, because there's no need to leave them on the launch pad. Now, we are going to spend the money and upgrade the astronaut complex, so now our Kerbals can EVA. It was interesting, I was wondering how that even happened, how they were even able to get out of the roving craft itself, and that's because technically, when they're in the external command seat, they're technically considered on EVA at that point, which is a little strange, but now that he can safely get out, he does so, takes a look at his surroundings, and then plants a flag in the name of the KXP third-person perspective journey. It wasn't the first flag on the MUN, but nonetheless, this concludes the MUN, not the MUN program because that's part of Strategia, but our necessary goal of planting a flag on every celestial body. This celestial body has been ticked off. And pretty happy with that, pretty proud of that. Fortunately, it did cost the life of Wenlas. It's interesting to think that the only reason why she died was because we had collision turned on in our Parallax. If we didn't have the, if back when we installed this mod and put it on and did our settings, if we had decided to play with no collision on, she would have easily just driven down the hill, safely parked next to the craft. They both would have hopped on, had a good old time, and headed home. But because we chose to do collision, it ultimately led to her demise. And it's just interesting to think that the choices that you make when you set up your game in the mods that you test and create before you start your playthrough can really alter the course of your agency's history. You know, our first lost Kerbal right now, completely avoidable if the Rove Made mod or the Bon Voyage mod had worked, if we didn't have collisions on, if we as the pilot, you know what, I'm going to take responsibility for that. If I as a player decided to take it a little safer and not breakdance so much around, we wouldn't have lost our pilot today. So we're not very high. Our apoapsis leaves a lot to be desired, so we're going to point ourselves up to make sure that we don't crash into any mountain ranges over the MUN. And at a reasonable altitude, we go ahead and plot in a maneuver at our apoapsis and circularize. We're going to actually try to pull out and get our return trajectory home. I did forget to turn off the trajectories mod, so we make this nice fun shape. You do gotta turn that off in the map mode when going between celestial bodies, but this was the first time that I really paid attention to the fact that I didn't have a lot of fuel in the slightest. As you see here, we don't have enough delta V to make the maneuver that I wanted to, so let's just go ahead and circularize first, and then we'll figure out how to plot in our return trajectory home, because currently we are still on an impact with the MUN, and in an even darker area of the MUN too, so it's not ideal. So let's go ahead and open up flight computer, point towards node, execute, and get ourselves back into orbit. And it takes no time at all to get ourselves safely back into orbit in a high enough altitude that we're not going to hit anything. Unfortunately, we have nearly no delta V left. We have a bunch of life support, especially considering that what we brought for 2 Kerbals now is dealing with 1. But yeah, we don't have enough delta V to leave the sphere of influence of the MUN, much less get ourselves back home. So I'm playing around with a maneuver, and I'm going to just extend it out as far as I can, just burn as much delta V as I have. Let's just back that up, and that's as far out as I can go. And as I whip it around the planet, or the MUN, I'm trying to see if maybe one direction will send me flying off, but unfortunately none of them will. So we are not getting Tomeny Kerman home to pay honor to his pilot, so we are going to have to leave him in space for now. In the next episode, I think directly in the next episode, we're going to send out a rescue mission and bring him home. His life and experiences is even more valuable now, and we need to respect that and take care of him. The POV crowd learned the hard lesson of safety in their program, and now it is our turn. So he's going to transmit whatever science he can to help assist in the journey of getting himself back home, and then for now he's just going to sit back, review the notes that he had, think fondly of his friend, and orbit the MUN. I do have some plans to start pursuing Minmus. Now that we have a satellite network set up here at the MUN that is a fairly extensive one, we can start sending probes there, and I feel like starting off the Minmus probe program in Strategia might be good. It was worthwhile to get that amount of science that I had gotten from the MUN doing the same thing. So instead of rushing a crewed mission and getting a Kerbal there to plant the flag to conquer Minmus before POV does, we're going to take it one step at a time. But that is where I'm going to leave today's episode. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're looking forward for more KXP. If you did think about subscribing, drop me a like, let me know your thoughts, and I will see you all in the next one. Take care.